All right.
Good.
The neighborhood dog's just activated, so we'll see. Maybe it doesn't come through. Okay, I'm here with Eivind Skjellum again. So Eivind, as you know, but listeners don't know, we had recorded an episode last week and ran into some technical difficulties. So here we are again, and I'm glad we could try our hand at this again, getting this conversation out there.
Yeah. Let's hope the tech works this time, Brian.
Yeah, let's hope that Hermes is in our favor today. Listen, I wonder if you could start just by telling people where you are and what you do. Just how would you like to introduce yourself? That would be nice.
Right now, I'm sat in the downstairs office of a villa here. I live with my partner in a community outside of Stockholm. We chose to move to Sweden in April of last year. She has been living here for many years. Everything became a bit strange with COVID and the death of her father, so she was all over the place for a while. But we came here because she was almost complete with her required years for getting a citizenship, and so now she has a citizenship, and I realized I like it here. I never imagined myself as a Norwegian that I would move to Sweden, but here I am. I'm looking, well, it's dark now, but if it weren't dark, I'd be seeing the ocean down below. And so we have this lovely home here and great people that we live with. As for what I do for a living, I've been engaged in men's work now for many years. I created a training in a men's work organization back in 2014 called Reclaiming the Throne, and been doing that now for quite a while. We were approaching the decade, and the backbone, like the biggest inspiration and maybe the academic foundation for that work is the work of Robert Moore and the neo-Jungian lineage, which is what brought you and I into contact. So I've been deeply immersed in studying archetypes for more than a decade. And since I am from an academic family, Brian, and I never really played it that way. So I'm not approaching these archetypes mainly from an academic point of view. I'm much more of an empirical researcher. I just throw things at the wall or the canvas and I see what sticks. And then if it sticks, I like it. Okay, I'll use this. It's good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it was interesting to find your work actually, because as some of the listeners know, I've recently launched a men's coaching program that's based on Robert Moore's work, King, Warrior, Magician, Lover.
Yeah.
And I was telling you before that occasionally I'll get online and kind of poke around and see who else is working with this material. And I came across an interview that you did with Robert Moore's niece, which I'd like to talk about later. But that led me to checking out your legacy of work, including the Masculinity Movies website that you had for some years, and then finding Reclaiming the Throne, and listening to some podcasts that you had done during the pandemic where you're walking around talking about the archetypes and other things and how they relate to current events. And I thought, wow, this is a guy who has really taken Robert Moore's work and used it as a foundation for his own work. And it was really clear to me that you had immersed yourself in the material for a long time, steeped in it and gone deep. And I was really excited to find that because, you know, a lot of people talk about King, Warrior, Magician, Lover. They, you know, people who do coaching programs or podcasts might do an episode on it. They might do a little overview on it. but I haven't found other men who have gone as deeply as I have into it. And I just keep coming back to it over the years, because to me, it's the best, most effective framework for a man to begin working on himself, really. And I just find it just enlivens the imagination, and it engages men faster than anything else I've ever seen or experienced.
Yeah.
So it was great to find you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, good to meet you as well, Brian. I'm curious. I don't normally do questions when I come to a podcast interview, but I'm curious to hear from you. It sounds like you've been searching for several models that could inspire and influence your work and thinking. And I'm with you on this. I'm just deeply in love with the system. Though, how do you find that it relates to vertical development, if you understand, instead of like horizontal integration? Do you understand what I mean when I say that?
Well, I have my own kind of shorthand understanding of that.
Yeah.
Let's see if it matches with what you're thinking of.
Yeah.
So for me, the way that I imagine the archetypes sitting in a mandala is that the king is in the top. So if we think about a cross, it's perfect mandala of wholeness. And like Jung said, that the quaternity, the fourfold structure, is the archetype of wholeness.
Yes.
So Robert Moore's work sees 4 primary archetypes as the foundation for the male psyche. Yes. And female too, but like we're talking about the male. So at the top of that cross, the vertical, is the king. In the southern point is the magician. In the, I would say, the west is the lover, and the east is the warrior. So in that vertical realm, for me, the magician is an introverted archetype. It's about going within, learning how to meditate, to still the mind, to do personal inquiry work, study, that kind of thing. And for me, the king is the connection to God, to the divine, to that which is greater than oneself, and taking the directive from God. So classically, the king being the channel for the divine into the realm, and being the living embodiment of that. And so we could think of the king also as the wise elder, or maybe even the priest, or the father figure in some ways. And so I think that's how we connect to that verticality, is through the magician and the king. But to me, the king's maybe not something to practice so much, but it's the culmination of working on all of the other archetypes and integrating them. And it just comes with age and maturity and experience, I think. Yeah. I don't think we can do a weekend workshop on awakening your inner king and come out ready to be an elder. I think it takes time.
I agree. As frustrating as that might be for many people who want to build businesses around this.
Well, yeah, I mean, my coaching program, I've got it set up so we can do it over 6 weeks, and some men take a little longer to be with the material, so could be up to 12 weeks. But I'm really clear that these are just initiations into engagement with the archetypes, and that engagement has to take time, and your participation, so your effort and diligence and patience too.
True. I do believe that the acceptance of a slow pace, like the gradual marinating into new forms of consciousness and new habits, maybe even new values. I think it takes time. It's something that I'm sometimes a bit disillusioned with, this idea that everything should happen so fast.
Yeah, good. Yeah, it's a good thing to be disillusioned of. The fact that we can get this kind of transformation quickly and with little effort.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when I was describing how I think of how Robert Moore's model addresses the verticality, was that in line with what you were initially thinking of when you asked me that?
Well, the question, yes, this is an internal inquiry that I've been in a lot, and I don't know if it's easy for you listeners to just immediately step into this with me, but I'm been focusing a lot on the difference between vertical development and horizontal integration, and that there, with vertical development, you keep changing your fundamental beliefs about the world, and you have access to more witness consciousness. So I'm not nearly as identified with the objects of perception anymore, or the things that I am perceiving. And Ken Wilber, the integral philosopher, he would say that subject becomes object. And so gradually subject becomes object in higher and higher levels of development. And I have sometimes wondered about this archetypal system, if it's merely about horizontal integration, so we become well-functioning individuals within the worldview that we have, if you will, if that makes sense to you. So, for instance, if we were we're living in a world now, as far as I can tell, where the basic assumptions about civilization and about reality are being challenged.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
And how can we use this system in order to address such an unusual predicament as we find ourselves in? I think is my fundamental inquiry. And there's also the intersection here of the archetypal work of Robert Moore, and maybe some of your listeners know about integral philosophy and Ken Wilber, and that there are systems or maps that I think need to be combined in order to have a full-fledged system of or an epistemological map, and the way that I understand the world, as well as a way that I actually choose to transform in this lifetime.
Mm-hmm.
So,
I got a little yellow flag came up for me when you're describing his system. And so, what I heard was that in his system, the higher levels development, as you move through those, subject becomes object.
mm-hmm.
For me, it's the opposite, actually, that the more I feel that I gain wisdom and I grow and my perspective on myself and the world expands, the more objects become subjects.
Interesting.
But I think what you're getting at is that I'm able to detach from those subjects. So,
yeah, that you can have equanimity about things instead of being completely consumed by them, right?
Yeah, well, I think being able to detach, which is a kind of key quality of that magician archetype, is the ability to detach, but not detaching by turning subjects into objects, but allowing them actually to have their own autonomy, but being able to let them be free so that I can be free. That's kind of the way I think about it, is if I'm able to detach in a healthy way when needed, it allows for more freedom in myself and more freedom for the other person. They can be who they are, I can be who I am, and we can coexist in some kind of harmony. But that, to me, is a high level of development, and it takes a lot of practice to get to that point where you're able to do it. And it's something I aspire to. It's not something that I live 24/7, like even Christ had his moments.
Yeah, he flipped some tables.
You flip some tables, and not only that, but that's the kind of common story that we hear, that he goes into the temple and he's outraged at what he's seen with the money lenders there and everything. You've turned my temple into a den of thieves. But after that, he's going around with some of his followers, and they're preaching the ministry and all that stuff. and they're getting hungry, and they come across a fig tree. And so they're really excited. They're going to have some food finally. And Christ walks up to the fig tree, and it's not bearing any fruit. So you would expect, Christ of the loaves and fishes, turning water into wine, would maybe make the fig tree bloom with luscious fruit that would feed all of his friends. But no, he curses the fig tree for not bearing any fruit. And not only that, but he curses it for the rest of its life to not bear any fruit. Kind of like, well, if I can't have any, no one else can either. And he kind of throws a little hissy fit.
I remember that story.
Takes it out on this poor fig tree. And I was thinking, like, why would they include this story? It doesn't paint him
what is the moral of
well, it doesn't paint him in the best light. He
Yeah.
seems kind of like petty, and you could kind of maybe turn it into some sort of parable and draw out some moral. But that's a hard one to like.
Well, if you're gonna save humanity, you have to curse some fig trees along the way. It's just.
Well, the way I take it is that, what it's showing is that's Christ's human side. He was the God man, and that was definitely the human side of him that could get upset and be petty.
It's funny.
But Edward Edinger, the Jungian, said that that was a result of his inflation. So he had been accepted into Jerusalem and seen as the coming Messiah. So he was like really full of himself at that moment. So it was following that event that he went in and turned over the moneylenders' tables and cursed the fig tree. So Edinger talks about it as that being part of his grandiose inflation that he was caught up.
Fascinating. So very human.
It's a good lesson for us too. Yeah, very human. Yeah, right?
Very human.
Like what Moore talks about, when we get possessed by these archetypes, we get really inflated. We get all shiny and charismatic, but we also get really full of ourselves. And that's usually what leads to some sort of fall or tripping us up in some way. Yeah.
Yeah, very much. I'm currently within a period of a lot of I wouldn't say humiliation, but humility. Think there are cycles of my life where there's some period that is like profoundly humbling, and it often seems to precede a big change in what I focus on in life, or like how I live my life. And I think in terms of the grandiosity that comes from being too close to the archetype, the humbling is the medicine, and well, humility, of course, it has the same stem as soil, humus. So it derives from the idea of being close to the earth.
Yeah.
And when you've been flying high, maybe that's a very good place to go. Close to the earth.
Yeah. Maybe better to have someone around who can bring you back down to earth, with a little more gentleness before you crash like Icarus
before the wings burn
ocean, or before the wings burn up, right?
Yeah.
But he was so inflated, he wouldn't listen to Daedalus. He wouldn't listen to his father. He's like, I know what I'm doing.
Yeah.
It's part of the inflation is you don't listen to other people, right?
It most certainly is. I mean, that's the beauty of youth, is that you have such incredible faith in how the rightness of beliefs and like it's just obvious that my way is the right way. But that's the ignorance, but also the what is wonderful, I think, about being young. It gives a lot of energy to create things and do things. But now that I'm 43 years old, and I guess I'm just a couple of years younger than you are, Brian, there's something beautiful with starting to have quite a collection of shall we say, proof that I'm very often wrong.
Yeah.
You know, and I guess this is really eventually where the king archetype comes out of, where I discover the true service in my leadership and in my presence for other people. It's not about proving myself anymore.
Yeah, definitely like what you're talking about with humility, the hummus, close to earth nature of it. That to me is very indicative of a good king or good elder, is that they are very earthy.
Yeah.
You know, they've been on their flights of fancy and they've been on their transcendental journeys, and they've decided to come back down to earth to be of service to the community and to the earth itself, perhaps.
Yeah. That's beautiful. So you're basically saying, if I understand you correctly, that being an elder is by definition being very deliberate or intentional in being human and close to the earth.
I think so. Yeah, because people can get older without becoming elders.
Yeah.
And it's been hard for me to find elders in my life that are actually like physically close to me. You know, most of the good elders I've been able to connect to live very far away. And, you know, it's thanks to the telephone and Zoom that I've had any kind of contact with them. And, you know, also through their books and maybe recorded lectures like with Robert Moore, who never got to meet. But I still feel a spiritual connection to. Yeah. But not having those physical elders around to really lean on has caused me to think quite a bit about what makes an elder.
Yeah.
And part of it, I think, is having gone on those flights of fancy and, you know, really gone out and explored, maybe not geographically so much as explored the spiritual aspects of life, the non-material aspects of life. And like the bodhisattva coming back and choosing to be of service and realizing that you have a responsibility to those younger than you and to those that are yet to come.
Yeah.
You know, and I just see too many older people abdicating that responsibility or that role, and it leaves a void. And like we talked about in our previous conversation, you know, when there's a void of the king in the culture and within the person, it's going to get filled up by something. You know, nature abhors a vacuum, as they say. And, you know, if you're left with a God size or elder size hole in you, it's going to lead you to try and fill it with all kinds of things.
Yeah. And typically not very good things.
Yeah. Well, I think things that are maybe quite limited, they're a poor substitute for the real deal. You know, like an ideology or a celebrity guru trying to fill that elder hunger or that elder size hole in you.
I interviewed Michael Butler. He's an Orthodox priest, American Orthodox priest, for my new podcast now on Friday. And he was talking about all of these things, how people were deeply longing. He was experiencing how a lot of young men lately, often young single men, are coming to the Orthodox Church because they feel such longing for something meaningful, and that they have deep pain with the state of the world that doesn't provide them any nutrients. And a lot of them come in to him, and you know, they're very addicted and all have all kinds of issues, and that's why they seek God. And really, a lot of the men who come to Reclaim Unitron are in a very similar place. We work a lot with addictions on Reclaim Unitron, and in part because I've had so many of them myself, and realizing that the symptoms of having an empty heart and soul, you know, of really not feeling that I'm full with meaning. The symptoms are as painful as they may be, and typically what I'm speaking about here is addictions. They can also become gateways to deeper realization, and to actually, funnily, they can become gateways that lead back to the place that that we need to go in order to fill and become whole again.
Yeah. Yeah, that resonates. So someone that I've trained with, Gabor Maté, who's a Canadian physician and you know, kind of an acclaimed authority on trauma and addiction. You know, he got kind of famous with this question that he asked that reframed addiction for some people. He would ask, not why the addiction, but why the pain. And I've sat with that for quite a long time, and I think that's a good beginning to the inquiry. But for me, the next question is not just why the pain, but what is the desire that the addiction is reaching for to be fulfilled? And that to me leads us in a more positive, generative direction. If we think about what is the unmet desire in me that I'm kind of trying to fulfill, but it's in an unconscious and confused or distorted way. And that becomes a portal to me, not into the past to try to find the source of my trauma in my childhood and all of that, but a portal into the future possibility of who I could be. Yeah, that's very interesting. You know, I wanted to ask you, you're talking about interviewing this Orthodox priest and about a lot of young men who are searching for something more in their life or some direction, finding their way to the Orthodox Church. I mean, this is something that I've just been sitting with, really steeping in it for the past while, and maybe I'll get your take on it. So what do you think about this, about, because I've heard about this kind of revival of Orthodox Christianity, like really smart, intelligent people signing up to Greek Orthodox Church or other Eastern Orthodox churches, and loving the kind of ritual and the liturgy and the icons and all of that. I think it's a good start to begin by looking at the tradition of your own culture. You know, we're talking about Christianity here. But do you think actually literally going and signing up, becoming baptized maybe into these Orthodox churches, do you think that's the right move at this stage in the game?
Well, I haven't done it. Let me just confess that first of all. Currently, in terms of religious affiliation back home in Norway, I'm connected to the Buddhists through a sangha, a Tibetan Buddhist sangha. So I'm considering changing that. Even though the Buddhist part of my life was very significant, there's something about returning to the religious roots of my own culture that has become more and more important. And I remember my father, he became very concerned when I became interested in Buddhism while he was still alive. And he was concerned that I was somehow going to become a lost son, you know, and that I was now becoming pulled into some sort of navel-gazing Eastern spiritual pursuit. I don't think that's exactly what happened in the end, but there's something in my heart, at the very least, there's something in Christianity that has been impossible to shake.
Yeah, me too. Good way to put it.
Through my whole adult life.
Yeah.
And I told you briefly last time we spoke, when we had the tech issues, that I had this a retreat experience at the Buddhist retreat center connected to the Norwegian Sangha, where I went to bed this night and I had a very strong sense of presence by the bed, super strong. And there were two beings, and one of them I immediately identified as the Buddha, and the other one was Jesus Christ. And I was very flabbergasted by the second. I was like, why are you here? Like, I'm a Buddhist now. I'm in a Buddhist retreat center. Why are you here? And initially I was angry and scared, because I felt like I was being visited by something that was not welcome. And gradually I started to find this profound rest in this very strong experience in my spiritual journey of having these two beings viscerally present at the side of my bed, and realizing that they weren't actually opposed to one another at all. It felt very much like brothers, spiritual brothers, and that they had served different purposes in the awakening of humanity and the salvation of humanity, but they were still working towards, well, not exactly the same goal, which I would just say, to not get too theological or heretical, that I found that they both belonged in my heart. Right. And
yeah, I mean, who knows what their intended purpose is, right? Like, you started to go there and then you pulled back, but I like
yes,
that maybe that's unknowable, but they both belong in my heart somehow.
yeah, they do. And I like to say that in terms of spirituality, the Buddha is the mind and the Christ is the heart, and that you need them both in order to be a complete spiritual practitioner.
Mm-hmm.
And I just, when I hear about these young men and when I hear about the revival of Christianity, I become happy. I feel it's a good thing, I really do, even though I can vividly remember the many people who have tried to convert me to their Christian ways over the years, and how annoying I found them, and how at the end of the day they didn't really have the faith that they pretended to, because I just see that their spiritual grounding was actually quite shallow as I've seen them from afar over time. So I just think there's a lot of people that have wanted to convert me to their spiritual ways over the years, and at the end of the day, for me, it has to be a very personal thing, and I'm very happy that more and more people are actively seeking out Jesus Christ again. I think it's a very good thing. And the Orthodox Church, I don't know them well, but what Michael said was, I asked them, what is it that makes the Orthodox Church different from other denominations? And then he said something that I didn't know, is that they considered themselves to be a pre-denominational church, like the original church, and that they very much have not changed over the last 1,000 years. And when you hear things like the Reformation and all that, this wasn't part of the history of the Orthodox Church at all. And so there's something very ancient that lives there that is completely different to contemporary culture. And I think, therefore, that all of the people that have been so deeply traumatized by the vacuity and the garish, it's just our culture is just garish by now. It's like just sick. And that these people have an opportunity to find a place where they actually still even today can feel that life has meaning. That can only be good in my perception.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I guess I'm hesitant to celebrate it too much, because, like you said, that they've tried to preserve this this church for 1,500 years or however long it's been.
Right.
And I'm not sure that's a good thing, actually.
Mm-hmm.
I think religions have to evolve, and they have to be responsive to the spirit of the times while they hold the spirit of the ages, and carry that forward. And yeah, I'm not sure like where I really sit with it now. Like, I'm kind of in it, and I'm wondering, well, how do I address this Christian concern? Because, like you, it's been something that I've not been able to shake. I've been trying to shake it off my whole life. When I went deeply into yoga, who was there at the end of the road? It was Jesus Christ. I find myself going through a practice, and poof, there he is. Okay. And I run off to the Amazon to drink ayahuasca with indigenous people, and boom, there he is in the middle of a ceremony in the jungle.
Yeah.
And so I have to reckon with it as part of my spiritual and cultural inheritance, and navigating, what does it then mean? How do I honor this? Do I go into the Anglican church in which I was baptized? Do I try to find an older, more kind of quote unquote more pure expression of Christianity through maybe the Orthodox Church or a group of Gnostics or something like that? And I'm not sure that going back is the way forward. I'm having a kind of hazy vision of something that is inspired by Christ saying that where two or more gather, there I am. And I've got this hazy vision of us meeting out in nature, outside anything that we'd recognize as a church structure, any kind of dogma, where we meet in nature in a spirit of friendship, and sitting with these questions of what to do with the world and what is our role in being stewards of this world, and maybe having some arguments around a fire on what to do with it all, and then coming together and breaking bread in the old way, and maybe having a cup of wine or ale, and then going out and doing some of the things that we argued about, something like that. That's the kind of, and maybe I'd have to sing some songs too. Music's a big part of it for me. But that's kind of the church that I would like to join. And I don't know if anything else could be a substitute for that. I just but I'm not sure if anyone else is interested in that.
Are you going to start a church? A nature church?
Yeah, well, maybe I don't know. I don't know where it's all leading, but something's kind of dragging me along in that direction.
It sounds to me like you have a very personal connection to Jesus Christ, but you're more negative towards the church as an institution.
Yeah, I don't know about actively negative. It just seems kind of like it's over. It seems more benign to me than anything. I just don't feel a lot of juice there. I mean, over my lifetime, I've checked out all the different churches, from the spiritualist churches to the clean, kind of post-Reformation Protestant type churches with just like a minimalist cross and like
They're kind of
none of
boring.
none of the window dressing, the Universalist kind of churches and all of that. And I mean, there's something I love about going to visit a cathedral kind of in the off hours. Like I
Yeah,
love
it's
being in the
amazing. Oh,
space and
yeah,
being with those
same.
images and the smells.
Meditating there is it's incredible. I mean,
Yeah.
to speak of archetypes there, there's just such a connection. And the architecture of a cathedral, the way that it constellates the axis mundi of the king is just really remarkable.
Oh yeah. Yeah. It's
Yeah.
like, to me, as a designer, I look at that and I go, this is a spiritual machine. And the problem for me is when I go into, I was in San Francisco once and I went to visit Grace Cathedral on Easter Sunday, not during the mass or anything, but like in the off hours, like when I go to visit, when it's more quiet. I remember going in there and just being amazed at the architecture and all the stained glass and the giant pipe organs and all this, just like this spiritual machine. And the thing that was so kind of illustrative of me of the state of the church is I walk in and I look on the floor, there's a giant inlaid marble labyrinth in the center of the floor. So meant for people to walk around and use as a meditation device, like walking around the mandala. But instead of being available for walking meditation, there was a bunch of folding chairs put on top of it so that people could sit and listen to the liturgy rather than do a practice that would give them a direct experience of God. And that to me just said it all about the state of the church these days. It's like somewhere people have lost the user manual for how to get these spiritual machines up and running so that people can have a personal experience of gnosis.
Yeah. Well, this is just a symptom of the times that we live in. I feel clear that we're really coming to the end point of a time in humanity where we have just outsourced our authority. We've just externalized authority, and whoever has the right letters to their name, they have the right position, then like a large majority of the population goes like, oh, well, if they say so, I guess it must be true. And then any kind of intuition or any kind of hunch that it isn't true, it's just discarded as irrelevant. And I think even the church has fallen prey to this way of thinking. Like, I don't think any part of our society has escaped this. And maybe we really never had a different way, and that only now are we starting to become awake enough to realize that this way doesn't actually work, and that sovereignty is the name of the game. And for me, this whole pandemic really has been centered around this word sovereignty, and that there has been a widespread attack against those that want sovereignty. It has been organized from every strata of society, and so many of the people in my life, but normal people have been recruited as foot soldiers in the war on sovereignty. So no wonder you're going into a church and you're not finding any place for personal practice, because anything personal is just like, is practically illegal. You're supposed to be
dangerous to the status quo.
Yeah, you're supposed to be following the norms. You're supposed to do what is safe for everyone and don't make people comfortable. And if you do make people uncomfortable, then we're going to cancel your ass and remove your accounts. And even, in Canada now, where you're from, they started to freeze people's bank accounts if they have the wrong opinions. We're really in a completely crazy place. And I think for me, in the midst of all of this, there is a very strong presence of a Christian theme, where, like, I've been speaking about this on the podcast that you've listened to. It's like I didn't used to take the Bible seriously, but it almost now I always sometimes open it and it feels like I'm reading the word of prophecy. You know, it's like well, this shit is happening right now. Like this is crazy, huh? And yeah, I just think we live in very interesting times.
Yeah, like
You
that
know,
old Chinese curse. I mean, we live in
yes,
interesting times. So
yeah. My
we're in
partner
it.
Michelle is Chinese actually, or Hong Kong, and yeah, we're very much in these interesting times, and at the end of the day, the presence of archetypal themes right now are stronger than they have been at any point in my lifetime.
Yeah.
You know,
I think, think about men, thinking about masculinity over the past, I don't know, 500 years, like when things really changed during the Industrial Revolution and men started going off to factories and all of that.
Yeah.
And then the Great Wars, of course. I've never really thought about this before, but you can look at different periods in fairly recent history and see how different archetypes were more centrally apparent, or they were constellated in a profound way. We can see, obviously, there's a time for the warrior in our Western culture. Definitely lots of magician. I mean, the age of technology and the technological boom. And I think even coming out of the 60s, the lover being very constellated and leading to this kind of soft man syndrome that our leaders in the men's movement talked about in the 90s. And they were trying to, Robert Bly talked a lot about reclaiming the inner wild man, kind of offset that kind of passivity and softness of the man, which I think was just a healthy response to the patriarchy of the 40s and 50s, and kind of North American Western culture at least, but probably broader. And I wonder now if it's the time of the king. Like what you're saying, I think there is a real war on personal sovereignty. And if sovereignty isn't the realm of the king or the role of the king within, I don't know what is. And I see a direct correlation to the awakening of Christ consciousness.
Yeah.
And I think that's where my hesitancy comes from about guys going to the church, the literal church, because I think really the move is, it was foreshadowed in so I was part of a Brazilian ayahuasca church. And
what's it called? Santo Daime or something like that?
Yeah, Santo Daime.
Santo Daime, yeah.
Their belief was that the ayahuasca vine was here to awaken Christ consciousness in the hearts of all men, all humans. And so that's why it's spreading across the globe so rapidly. So that's their belief, is that by drinking this sacrament, it awakens Christ consciousness in your heart. And this is the second coming. And the cross that they use on their altar has a second, shorter horizontal beam above the central beam, representing this second coming in the hearts of all men. And that to me is directly related to reclaiming the inner throne, the focus of your work, and the cultivation of personal sovereignty. And I'm reminded of what Jung said about the idea that we should imitate Christ. It's an old Christian idea.
Yeah.
And, in the 90s, I remember people having bumper stickers and tattoos and t-shirts of what would Jesus do? Like, we want to imitate Christ. We want to be like Jesus. But what Jung said is, like, don't take it literally. Don't mimic his particular actions. Imitate him in that he was a sovereign, unique individual and living that out in the world as an example.
Mhm.
So to imitate Christ is to be yourself, as fully as you can,
Right.
to embody all of these different archetypal potentials, which
Yeah.
were all present in the figure of Jesus Christ. So
Absolutely.
I think that's maybe the next move that I'm feeling is needed, is the awakening of the Christ consciousness within, finding personal sovereignty. And what that's going to allow you to do is find brotherhood and sisterhood with others, to have some of that healthy detachment that we talked about earlier, to allow
Mhm.
others to be fully themselves.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know. It's a vision that's
Yeah.
forming for me anyway.
Yeah. I like what you say, and I have so many questions about what it means. For instance, in experimenting with ways of running organizations, what does it mean that everyone inside of the organization is sovereign? Practically speaking, in the day-to-day running of it, does it mean that the leader, in this case me, this is a very personal inquiry, that I kind of surrender my need to be on top of things and just hope that the emergence that comes from sovereign people is better than anything that I can conceive of myself? And do people in the organization actually have readiness to even be sovereign? Which one of the things that Michelle, my partner, is working with. She's working a lot with making or working with teams and organizations in order to make them work in a teal way. It's this, like, maybe you know it, but
Integral theory.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
where it's more of a people are more autonomous inside of the organization and have agency, and so you have a lot of flow in the team because everyone is doing their thing and are responsible for it. But in practice, she's finding that people don't really want that. They want somebody to tell them what to do.
Give me the to-do list. Yeah.
Right. So I have so many questions. Like the civilizational questions that we're sitting with now have such high levels of complexity that it's overwhelming for me at times.
I think, maybe where it begins is with the spiritual practice. I wonder, like,
For
why
sure.
have Westerners been such fervent seekers of real spiritual practice? And they've had to go to the east, to the
Mm-hmm.
south. People are going north and doing learning how to read runes and things like that. Like, people are really hungry for some kind of actual practice, not just a
Yeah.
framework or a theory, but something to actually do to cultivate, what, the way I would see it is cultivating the king within, or the God within, the Christ consciousness within, Buddha nature within, however you want to think about it, cultivating that spiritual potential within yourself through practice. So why have we been so hungry for this? And I think it's leading us to the ability to actually be sovereign individuals, which doesn't mean we don't collaborate, which doesn't mean that we don't know when to step back and let someone else lead in that particular moment. So I don't see sovereignty of the individual as canceling out hierarchy or leadership, because I think teams always need those things, and
Yeah.
the sovereign individual is able to see where they fit best in that overall
Great.
ecology.
Great. Yes. So there are very profound themes being worked out for a lot of people now around hierarchy and around power. This is something that I notice across the board. And this is, I think this as well is particular to us men, because we are so conditioned culturally to be providers. And so we need to perform, right, in order to feel that we have some level of dignity. And in this place, it's weird, but it seems to end up in these places where we as men, we are fighting each other because we have this idea of limited resources, and we also then have a fragile ego. We come to have a fragile ego because we're so myopically focused on making it in the world. And so if there's a kind of feedback offered that indicates that you're not making it in the world, then all of the defenses come right up, you know? And
Yeah.
this I think is a real problem for us men right now, because on the one hand, there is this softness, and I would say that an apathy has taken the men of the world.
Mm-hmm.
Like, yeah, what does it matter anyway? You know, we're just the patriarchy. We're violent. You know, fuck it. You know, I'm just gonna sit over here and jerk off to porn.
We're toxic, and yeah, I think a lot of that is response to the kind of already passive men hearing this kind of messaging from the wider culture and internalizing it. And actually, what I see that as is just an excuse to be even more passive, and to kind of fall into that pit.
Yes.
These are men who don't have that deeper source of power. We're talking about reclaiming the throne and finding the inner king, finding the Christ consciousness within. That's a deep source of power. That's like connecting to the river that runs under it all. And if you have that, you're not going to be competitive. You're not going to come from a scarcity mindset. You're not going to see other men as potential threats. So that to me is where it all begins, whether it's the religious problem or the societal problems, it's getting men connected to that deep spiritual source. I don't think without that, anything will change.
Yeah. Yeah.
But how do we get men to the well? That's the question I've always had.
As a man, you need to have a template to model who you are.
I think it's so helpful. It's like men, I think of men as builders, mechanics. They love technology. We love all that. And so we need that blueprint as the way in.
I completely agree. And in terms of, reclaiming the throne is an online initiation. And an initiation, of course, is about some kind of passage in life, whether it's from boy to man or from one chapter of life to another. And we don't have these culturally established as mandatory rituals. It's just a small minority that maybe because they're kind of quirky, they choose to do it. They like myth or whatever, and they're like, oh, I want an adventure myself, and they go and find an initiation. But there's something there. If we don't have this initiation, I felt it, and all of the men, I think, I do think all of the men that come to reclaiming the throne, they have deep insecurities about this question, like, am I really a man, or am I just a boy fucking around, not really knowing what to do with my life?
Yeah. Well, if you have to ask that question, think the answer is pretty clear.
Right. Right. And so I think this, to go back to Jesus Christ, he's a template for masculinity. You know, he's like the perfect man, you know?
I push back on that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't think he was the perfect man. I mean, he was never married. He never had children. He,
Well, that's
he died when he was
this.
33. What
Hmm.
does he look like as an old man? You know, like what is a good man of age? What do they look like? What do they feel like to be around? We don't know that about Jesus. I mean, I think he was here for a certain purpose, but I don't think it was to display what it's like to be a full man.
Okay. Well, I
Where's
think
his
I'll look.
lover aspect? I mean, the sensual, erotic lover aspect. We could say, well, he was compassionate to all these people. Well, he wasn't compassionate to everyone.
Well, I
And
think
where
it
was his lover side? What was his sex life like? We don't know.
depends. It depends on what literature you take for historical accuracy, and what literature you think is just make believe. But if you were to read, among other things, this Mary Magdalene manuscripts that was channeled by this couple some decades ago, which was about the tantric relationship between Jesus Christ and Mary Magdalene.
Well, you
You
could
know?
read fan fiction written about anyone. It's an erotic fantasy that the couple had about Jesus.
Well, who
You know,
knows? I don't think the Bible is more authoritative than this. I don't.
yeah, yeah. But we could have a fantasy life about any mythological or historical figure, about anyone. But I'm just saying, as received through Scripture,
Uh-huh.
I don't think Jesus Christ is a perfect model for men to follow, or to model their whole life on, because to me there's just a lot of gaps, especially for men who are
Fair enough.
householders who are really living in the world.
Yeah. I do anyway think that he serves that purpose for a lot of men when they come into the church and they see somebody who has really dedicated themselves to serving a larger cause in their lives, and that there is a falling at rest inside of a man when he gets to look at himself in the reflection of somebody that they admire. And there are not so many men to admire in this day and age. And so for men to find men to admire, whether real or mythical, it just seems to be incredibly important. And in the absence of healthy initiation and healthy elders, this is important. And it is why back in the days I started masculinity-movies.com, where maybe more than anywhere else in our culture now, that is a place, movies are a place where we can go to feel the impact of these kinds of legendary beings, that the kinds of beings that are incarnations of archetypal patterns, and to feel how they impact us on a soul level as men, and draw in those nutrients. I think it's super important, don't you?
Yeah, I just think we need better movies, honestly. I've been doing a series on Instagram where I look at different recent films, and I've also been looking at some public figures too, and doing these little
Cool.
archetypal analyses on them. It's got its constraints because of character limits on Instagram, but that's a nice little structure for me to work within. And I've been looking around. I'm like, there's a lot of examples of what I would think of as some of the shadow aspects of the archetypes, but really hard to find examples where the man is like fully embodying the positive poles of the
Yeah.
archetypes. It's harder to
Yes.
find.
Yeah. 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 It makes me sad to think of how few men out there I actually genuinely feel inspired by.
Hmm.
We
Yeah,
have work to do there.
yeah, that's for sure. Um, so let's wrap it up. I'd like you, if you could, to tell people about the upcoming course that you've got running. So you've got another of your intensive immersions for
Yes.
Reclaim Your Inner Throne coming up, and I believe it might be the last one in this format. So tell us a little bit
Yeah,
about it.
it's true. The reason why it's the last one in this format, actually, I wanna add that, is that we have discovered that while this incredibly intensive 3-month experience that you can now join is super powerful, for some men that like to do things in a slightly different at a different pace, and some men also don't have the same capacity for transformation, and so they need to take their time. And so if you're the kind of guy that wants to take your time and be more sovereign in how you go through a journey, then you can wait. But if you want to have the last high intensity Reclaiming the Throne experience, then that starts on March 28th. And it is a training that we are running for I think it's the 16th time. And so it's a well-established journey. And it's going to take you very, very, very deep into your heart and soul, and make you face all of the wounds from your childhood, make you identify all of the addictions and self-sabotaging patterns that you developed in order to not deal with those wounds, and going to face all of your demons that you have been running away from your whole life, and going to be learning how to bridge your power with your heart, and really come to a crescendo where you do lineage work and step away with a vision for your life. And it is powerful work, and I would love for whoever is listening and feeling drawn to join us for that March 28th.
Yeah,
We're
just
going to have open enrollment for the first week.
okay.
Mm.
Yeah, just going to encourage men who are listening right now to you describe that journey. Just take a moment and check in with your heart and see if you can discern whether there's a yes
Yeah.
there. You know, you might feel the heart beating a little bit. You might feel an uplift of energy. Might feel a little fear in the belly at the thought of taking a course like this. But just take a moment to tune in and listen for that yes, or tell me more. Maybe it is just some curiosity about the course.
Yeah.
So if you're at all interested, I've got a link in the description below. It's innerthrone.com. And Eivin's got lots of work out there, lots of videos, a whole series of podcasts of him talking about archetypes and how they show up in the world, which is really fun, kind of get inside your head. Share a lot of your concerns about the world, that's for sure.
Yeah.
And also this drive to do something about it.
Mm. Mm.
You know, to
Good.
step up and show up.
I think we need as many men out there as possible speaking what's true and daring to go against the grain of culture, because culture is sick, and we need to have men who are willing to be agentic and to stand up in the town square and maybe look crazy for a little while, but speaking the truth.
Well, yeah, I don't know if I'd go so far as to say I know what the truth is about anything, but even to be asking the heretical questions. And that to me, I was talking to my wife about this yesterday, that to me is where I see the most value of the Christ archetype
Mm-hmm.
in the here and now is that what he did model for us was a willingness, like you said, to swim upstream, to go against the flow of the culture, and to stand for what he believed in. Yeah, I derive a lot of inspiration from that. It's like coming from a kind of punk rock, counterculture, independent music background. That's the kind of the side of Christ that really resonates with me. It's that counterculture rebel who's willing to say what he thinks, even when it goes against the grain, ruffle some feathers.
Yeah, it's so important, man. The world has never become better by people conforming and doing what everyone expects them to. And these days, this tendency of conformity and obedience, I would say obedience is the word, has become so widespread and so toxic that we are teetering at the edge of very, very, very dangerous, possibly cataclysmic events, unless people really get their shit together. And so I feel like we really, it's crunch time. It's 5 minutes to midnight. It's time to speak out and wake up.
Yeah. Well, I'm with you, brother. And
Yeah.
I'm glad we could do this, and I'm happy the way the conversation took its own course.
Yeah.
We've both got lots of information on our websites and all of that, and people can go to find out more. But I'm glad it felt like there's a real engagement with some of the ideas that we both work with. So that felt really good and nourishing.
Yeah, it's fun to speak about something that I care so much about with somebody who shares that love. So we didn't get to speak much about Robert Moore and Marina's interview, but I just encourage anyone who was distraught by the way that Robert Moore left this world to go on YouTube and find my video where we share the information that basically undermines the whole story that you've heard, and that proves decisively that he didn't shoot his wife and then kill himself. So
yeah. I'm going to include a link to that video below, because I think anyone who's interested in Robert Moore's work needs to hear that whole story, because I feel like his legacy has been tarnished by some falsehoods that have never been corrected. In the past 6 years, you're the first one I've heard who's really brought this to light. So appreciate that.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. All right.
Okay, my friend.
Good to connect again.
Yeah, good to connect. Take care.
Bye-bye.
The Medicine Path is produced by Brian James on unceded Coast Salish territory, Vancouver Island, Canada. For more information, visit brianjames.ca. Music by Olive Artizoni, aka Greenhouse. Join the Medicine Path tribe and gain early access to episodes and the full podcast archives at patreon.com/Medicine Path. May the road rise up to meet you. May the wind be always at your back. May the sun shine warm upon your face. May the rain fall soft.